Hey guys, welcome back to Left and Loaded. Today we're going to talk about ammunition. Let's check it out. There's a lot of confusion, at least there was when I was new to the world of firearms, around different kinds of ammunition. You have your calibers, but then you have your bullet size and diameter. You have kind of the European style and then the American style caliber, all of which are still referred to as calibers, yet some are measured in millimeters, whereas others are measured in inches, and then both are sometimes measured together at the same time. What? I don't even know what I just said. But let's just say that when it comes to ammunition and ammunition caliber, it can get a little bit confusing. Now, we're not going to go into the extraordinary detail of the hundreds of different kinds of rounds that exist out in the real world. We're going to talk about just a small handful of some of the more popular rounds that you will run into in your modern local American gun shop. Now, for viewers that may be outside of the United States, these may be a little bit different, and they also may be called something a little bit different. I'm going to do my best to keep it simple. I'm going to do my best to keep it short, but it might get away from me. So we'll just jump right in. What we have in front of me right here are a handful of very common pistol rounds, with the exception of this little guy right here. But we're going to talk about that one a little bit later. And I'll name them from left to right. Now, keep in mind, I said pistol rounds. Some carbines, oh boy, we're getting into it already. They look like rifles. They shoot pistol rounds, adding yet another layer of confusion. But again, that's a whole nother conversation. So starting on my left, we have a 22 long rifle. We have a 5.56. We have a 32 ACP. We have a 380 ACP. We have a 38 special and a 9mm. And this big chunky guy right here is 45 ACP. And when they're talking about some of these numbers, they're talking about regular American imperial inches. You'll see a dot before and followed by the numbers. So you are literally talking about 0.32 inches or 0.22 inches. So almost a quarter of an inch. Why did they decide to do it this way? You know what? I've done a lot of reading about this. I have absolutely no idea. Gun manufacturers, gun builders, they tended to also want to build ammunition for the type of firearm that they were building, and they would come up with these different sizes. Later on, you started to see requirements for sizes. The military would want a certain size bullet with a certain amount of powder so that they could have potentially a smaller bullet that's going to go faster because it has more powder inside the cartridge. What does that all mean for you, the common everyday gun enthusiast? Well, it means that you have a lot of options. It means that there are tons of different kinds of rounds that fit into tons of different kinds of firearms. And when I think about it, part of the reason that I had to scrounge up some of these different rounds is it can get really expensive and really complicated if you start collecting firearms in a whole bunch of different calibers, because now to take those guns to the range, you are going to need to have a big mix of different rounds, different caliber rounds to take with you to the range. I've tried to keep my collection pretty simple. I've got mostly 9mm. I've got a couple 380s. That's a smaller round. That's going to be this little guy right here. That my 380 pistols are much, much smaller. They fit in an ankle holster. They fit in a pocket. And I've got some 22s, this little guy right here, that are mostly for teaching. Taught my kids to shoot with the 22. I learned to shoot on a 22. So you got to keep some 22s around as well. But mostly what I have are the 9mm. It's a good round. It has good stopping power. The FBI just recently switched away from 40, which I don't have a representation of here, to 9mm because it's more efficient. And what that means is it's easier to get back on target because it has less recoil, and you can typically fit more 9mm rounds inside of a magazine, so they'll have more firepower in the same size package, and it's been proven to be almost equally as effective in stopping bad guys. So 9mm, in my opinion, is the better of the handgun rounds, and it's ubiquitous. You can find 9mm everywhere. Some of these other ones you might struggle a little bit more to find, which we'll talk about that too. So what is the difference that makes a different round a different round? Two things. The first thing is, and most obviously, you have the size of the projectile in the round. So if we're looking at a 9mm, how about this? If we're looking at a 45 and we're comparing it to a 32, you can see they're the same kind of round, but one is tremendously larger, both in length and in diameter from the other one. 45, 32. The 32 is going to typically be found, not always, but typically be found in a smaller framed gun. So 22, we're going to get the 5.56 out of here for now. 22, 32, 380, 38 special, 9mm, 45. So when you hear somebody talk about, I got a Colt 45, that's not the model of the gun, that's the round that it shoots, the 45. Or they say they have a 9mm. Well, they could have any of 1,000 different guns, but it shoots a 9mm round. And we talked about this in one of my first videos, that there are a few on this table right here, that have the same diameter projectile. We have the 38 special, the 380, and the 9mm, very different looking rounds, but all the same diameter barrel, which makes for, at least for me, it's easier to keep these different rounds, because if I need to clean those guns, I can actually use the same cleaning tools to clean all three of these guns. That's pretty nice. You might be asking yourself, what is the point of all this? Well, I honestly couldn't tell you. Different gun manufacturers, different specifications, different levels of stopping power and bullet speed all dictate different sized rounds. Unfortunately, that means that you have a big confusing mess of things going on out there that you and I have to kind of keep a handle on, or else it can get away from you pretty quickly. I find it easier to maintain a stock of 9mm than maintaining a small stock of every single kind of round out there. So a lot of gun manufacturers will actually make the same gun, if you think about a Glock, the exact same frame, sized, everything gun you can find in 3 or 4 different calibers. That is to let you, the consumer, have an option of what kind of caliber, what kind of round you want your pistol to shoot, but not have to sacrifice choosing a gun that you may not be comfortable with, or maybe you can't find a holster for because it's a super weird proprietary size or shape or weight or something like that. When you're dealing with a Glock specifically, the 9mm, 40, and in some cases the 357 and even the 45s, they might all be physically the exact same size gun. They're given a different number designation that tells you what caliber it is. And even more confusingly with the Glocks, the number designation of the model has nothing to do with the caliber that it shoots. Thank you, Glock. So what I have in front of me here, though, is an interesting representation of something that is also important to take into consideration. We talked about the little 22. This is 22 long rifle. And you can see, this might be hard to see, that the 22 is shaped very differently. Let's see if I can get it to focus, than the 9mm round. The 9mm has this groove that's crimped in it right here. That actually allows the gun itself internally to kind of grab a hold of this and spit it out when it's done being fired. The 22 requires a slightly different mechanism and has this rim around the edge. But what else is very, very different is the firing mechanism itself. This 9mm, and I believe all the rest of the ones I have here on the table, are called center fire cartridges, because this little primer here in the middle, that's that innermost circle, that is what starts the explosion inside of the round. That is called a primer. Your hammer or your striker taps that primer, creates the primary explosion that ignites the powder, creating the rest of your boom that turns into a bang. On the 22, you have a different mechanism. You have what's called a rim fire cartridge. So the priming, if you will, that primary explosion happens when the hammer hits the edge of this rim, and that then ignites the powder. A different way of firing the gun, which is, in some people's opinion, a less reliable way, and the 22 cartridge tends to be a lot dirtier. More powder residue, more cleaning of your guns than pretty much any of these other options here on the table. You might have noticed that a lot of these rounds look different on their tips, on the nose. And that's because there's all kinds of shapes and sizes when we're talking about different rounds, specifically pistol rounds, and it can get even more complicated when you get into rifle rounds. But as a representation, in my hand, I have 5 different rounds that have 5 very different shapes of bullet. You can see this one has a more rounded nose. This is a steel case 9mm. So if it's gray like this, it could be an aluminum case, it could be a steel case. This just happens to have a steel case. This is a brass cased 9mm with a copper jacket around the lead bullet. This one has more of a cone shape. This is a flat-nosed, lead exposed, partially copper jacketed 38 special, so you can actually see the lead on the tip of this bullet, followed by this semi-jacketed round. That one's kind of interesting, that's why I brought it out. We have a nickel case on this 38 special with a copper jacket, but you'll notice there's a little plastic piece in there. This is a Hollowpoint round. This one is for self-defense. Most of the rest of these you've seen here on the table are more for taking out to the range. This one is going to expand on contact and stop more quickly than these other rounds, so much better round for self-defense. So that's the Hollowpoint. And then this last one here, the 22, is also more of a range round, but these things, you can almost feel them separate a little bit on these 22s. So definitely meant for more range time, not so much a personal defense type situation. I wanted to take a quick second to talk about the Hollowpoint round. There's a lot of misinformation out there about Hollowpoints. What they are, what they're used for. I grew up in California in a very liberal household. And for whatever reason, all of the information and conversation that I ever heard about guns and bullets and deadliness, whenever there was conversation about guns, you would hear Hollowpoints talked about as the devil, in all honesty. They were considered to be cop killers. They were completely misrepresented as somehow a Hollowpoint could get through body armor or bulletproof vests, which is completely untrue. And so I always had this strange aversion to the Hollowpoint round because of a lot of the misinformation that I heard as a young kid growing up in an environment that maybe wasn't knowledgeable with guns. Well, definitely wasn't knowledgeable about guns, but was almost anti-guns to a certain degree, and therefore it was easy to vilify something like a Hollowpoint round. But I will say something about the Hollowpoint. This little guy has and will save lives. What? A bullet that will save lives? How does that make any sense? It makes sense for two reasons. If you're shooting a bullet and it's coming out of a barrel and it's going 1,000 feet per second and it's a big hunk of lead, that thing is going to easily penetrate, say, a human body. And it's going to go through my body and potentially keep going until it reaches something hard enough, thick enough, strong enough to stop it. Because it is designed to just fly straight, go fast, and rip through whatever the hell you put in front of it. So a normal 9mm, I say normal as in what's referred to as a full metal jacket. This has a full copper jacket around the lead. That's going to be the most common kind of casual range ammunition. This thing, just by the shape of it, it's going to go straight, it's going to keep going, and it's going to go for quite a while. Anecdotally speaking, they've proven time and time again that a 9mm regular full metal jacket round like this can easily penetrate through 4 home walls, drywall based sheetrock walls. So 1, 2, that's one wall, 2 pieces of sheetrock, and unless it hits a stud in there or something, it can easily get through 4 walls. So in my house, if there's a bad guy in the living room and 2 rooms down there's a sleeping child, and I shoot the bad guy with this full metal jacket round, there is a good chance that it makes it all the way into my son's room, because that's how fast these things are going, and they're designed to just keep going. The Hollowpoint round, remember the scary, evil Hollowpoint round? The Hollowpoint round is designed with a hollow center, and you can see these little, it's hard to see on the camera here, these little lines surrounding the jacket. Those are weak points on purpose because they're kind of like flower petals, and right now the flower hasn't bloomed yet. As soon as this hits something hard, or hard enough, human flesh and bone, it's going to expand. And from this little tight thing, it's going to open up and flatten out. The idea there being that more surface area equals slower movement through an object. Now, it's also been shown that with a Hollowpoint round, hitting your target, the bad guy, it may not even make it all the way out of the bad guy. So that is a much safer way of defending yourself than you shooting somebody that's trying to kill you and that bullet going through the bad guy and into an innocent bystander. And this has happened. This has happened many times. So how terrible would I feel if my decision to stop a bad guy with a gun ended in injury or death of an innocent person who just happened to be standing behind that person and maybe 100 feet away. They thought they were a safe distance away. I thought they were a safe distance away, but I was using the wrong ammunition and it goes through the bad guy and into the good guy. That is why everybody that carries a gun or has one in their house for self-defense, home defense, personal defense should have defensive ammunition in that weapon. There is no excuse unless, you're in a situation where your only option is one of these full metal jacketed, what they'll also refer to as ball ammo, because it's kind of shaped like a ball. These are target practice rounds. If you're going to try to protect yourself, you need a hollow point round. The last thing I wanted to talk about is an interesting topic, because as you'll notice, I have two pistols out here on the table, and that's not just for show. So the two pistols that I have out here on the table, you've got this mean black Sig Sauer. This is basically a Sig 229. 299? 22, I don't know. It's the reason I can't remember what it is because it's not that. It is modeled after that. It is basically exactly the same gun as the 229. I'm going to stick with 229. I might be wrong. But this is actually called the Sig Mosquito. Kind of a silly name, but they call it the Mosquito because it looks like your normal firearm, but check the chamber for safety. It holds a little baby round in there. You see the size of that barrel. Very small chamber hole because this big ass gun shoots this small round. This is the 22. Now over here to my right, I have another gun. This little baby pocket-sized pistol. This little baby pocket-sized pistol. Check clear for safety. This little guy shoots the same 22. So don't let the size of the firearm deceive you. These two guns could not be more different in size, but they shoot the exact same 22 caliber round. And I thought that was kind of both interesting and maybe a little bit funny. So last thing, there's a lot of debate, and I'm not going to get into the debate about AR-15s. AR-15, the black gun, the scary assault rifle, military style assault rifle. And yes, the AR-15 is the civilian version of the M16, the military rifle used starting in Vietnam. Totally accurate. It is a military modeled rifle. It is not an M16 machine gun that a lot of people will mistakenly refer to the AR-15 as, it's an M16, so it's got to be a machine gun. Incorrect. Most civilians cannot purchase machine guns, nor should they want to purchase machine guns. The AR-15 is a platform. There are many, many, many different AR-15s out there, different sizes, different chamberings of type of round that it takes, different manufacturers, different physical sizes. The AR-15 that most people are going to be familiar with is going to fire a cartridge known as 5.56, which looks like this. Now, 5.56, it looks kind of scary because it's really long cartridge. It's got a lot of powder in there. It's because the 5.56 round is designed to penetrate because it has a very, very fast projectile coming out of it. You'll see this one has a green tip. That is so that you'll know this is a 5.56, not to be confused with a 2.23, which is physically identical in size and every single proportion is the same, except the 5.56 is a much more powerful round than the 2.23. This is what the military uses, and if you're going to go target practicing with your AR, don't waste your money on 5.56, just get the 2.23. This projectile, though, remember when I say projectile, I'm talking about the bullet inside of the gun, or the bullet that comes out of the gun, the piece that flies, that's your projectile, aka bullet. The bullet, you can see where the cartridge ends and the bullet starts. The bullet, hey, guess what? It is the exact, it is the same diameter as the projectile that comes out of the 22. This little tiny baby 22 is the same caliber as this mean looking 5.56. Crazy, right? So why is the 5.56 more deadly than the 22? Well, if you can see the difference in the amount of powder that is in the 5.56 versus the 22, no comparison. This is going to have a lot more power than the amount of powder that fits in this little cartridge right there. So the 5.56, the scary AR-15 round, I mean, look at the difference in the size of the projectile coming out of the 45 compared to the 5.56. But the 5.56 is going many times faster than the bullet that comes out of the 45 cartridge. So I hope this didn't add confusion to anyone's ammunition quest for knowledge. It is confusing. There's a lot to it, and this is just a small sampling of the many, many, many different rounds that exist for handguns and rifles. This is one rifle round when there are hundreds, and this was only a small handful of pistol rounds, of which there are dozens, maybe more. But these were some common ones. I wanted to share them with you. I just happened to get some 32 ACP rounds because it just got a new pistol. It's a really old school CZ50 that was carried by a Czechoslovakian policeman back in the day. Maybe I'll show it to you in a video sometime. But it fires this funky little 32 ACP round, and I've never shot a gun that is chambered in 32 ACP, so I'm excited to do that. I wanted to share this with you, and the next thing that we're going to talk about in the next video is going to be magazines. There is some confusion around magazines, and I realized that I created some of that confusion by referring to the video where I compared the Glock 43 with the Walther CCP, talking about them as single stack 9mm. And I had some people reach out and say, what the heck is a single stack? What are we stacking? Great question, and I'm going to answer that next. But thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit. I hope this was informative. I'll see you next time. Peace.